Oops, that's him. Shit. Oh, crap. Hello, everyone. That's stupid. There you go. I know. Yeah. I don't think I'm muted. I don't hear him. I don't hear him.
Brittany, are you there? Shit.
Oh, there I am. Hey.
You put me on hold.
Are you off hold now? Because I think you're off hold now. I don't know. I was trying to find you.
I don't know. I don't know if I'm off hold because it said the conference has started, but the recording has started.
We're both off hold. I'm going to call back in and make sure I'm on hold because I can't find myself. But you're off hold, and everyone can hear you.
You mean I can start swearing? I can start swearing right now?
Yeah, stop swearing right now. Everyone can hear you.
Oh, no. I said start swearing. I can start swearing right now. That's cool.
I'm all for it.
Okay, so I'm good. I mean, we're recording and I'm ready to go.
Sorry. Yep.
You're certain?
I can hear you now.
Can everybody else?
How am I supposed to know that?
I'm off hold, though, right?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay. Well, I'm a little nervous now.
I know. Well, that's just the way I do things.
Okay, so you actually think I'm ready to go?
Your toes. Yeah, you're good.
Okay. All right, bye.
Bye.
Well, hopefully you guys can hear me. I left off last night in the middle of the Minnesota Rule 220. Now, it's funny. I know a lot of people are worried about these documents. I understand there's not a whole lot to go over. I sent you all the documents that I recorded, so you actually have physical copies of what I did. It can't be confusing at this point as to what I did. You can see it, all 8 pages of it. Now, the only thing I would add for you guys is if you can get a personal DNA profile, which is also what I sent a link yesterday along with what it looks like because a friend of mine sent his actual DNA results, profile results, and they're up at pCloud at the student Dropbox. So you can actually see what one looks like. But other than that, everything I recorded, you already have it. You already have those documents. The only thing I would add, realistically, to not confuse anybody, is if you choose to find a place to get that profile done. And by the way, I would try to find that particular company and get that. I would not do anything via mail because they're going to ask you to authorize or sign off on something. I wouldn't do that. Hell, I wouldn't even get a golf pass where they wanted me to sign off or waive my rights to an image across the board. So I wouldn't do that. But if you guys want to do it, I'm not telling anybody what to do. I'm just saying that those 8 pages that you see that I sent you earlier this week, plus personal DNA profile. Okay, so I'm going to go over this Minnesota 220 again. I'm about halfway through it. So I think I ended, I'm going to read it, and I'm going to start where I should start. So Rule 220 again. Remember, I established in my county, I recorded all of these pages as a notice under Minnesota Rule 220. So the notice itself is for Minnesota Rule 220. That's all. It's not a notice for anything else. It's a notice for Minnesota Rule 220. And then my affidavit is what Minnesota Rule 220 requires me to do. And that follows. All the pages after this is based upon Minnesota Rule 220. So Minnesota Rule 220, birth certificates. The registrar of titles is authorized to receive for registration of memorials upon any outstanding certificate of title. An official birth certificate pertaining to a registered owner. Owner. Can't say it enough. A registered owner named. The owner's name. There's actually a name of the owner on the certificate. In said certificate of title showing the date of birth of said registered owner. So now the birth date is the owner's birth date. So if you can start to put all this together, you do understand there's only one birth date there and who it's for. It's not my father's, it's not my mother's, so it has to be Curtis Richard Kallenbach, the birth date of the owner, and the owner is Curtis Richard Kallenbach. Providing there is attached to said birth certificate an affidavit. So I have an affidavit right behind the notice, and I have a certified copy of a certificate of live birth. Now they say birth certificate. It says attached to said birth certificate an affidavit of an affiant who states that he or she is familiar with the facts. Familiar with the facts. So what is familiar? Let's see what familiar has to say. We already did this probably 3 weeks ago, but familiar. Fair or reasonable knowledge of or acquaintance with, closeness, intimacy. You can't get any closer or intimate than you sharing DNA. It doesn't get any closer than that. Again, fair or reasonable knowledge. What is knowledge? Well, knowledge is the record itself. Knowledge is the information. So, or acquaintance with. Isn't that funny? If somebody has the birth record in their possession, that actually qualifies as familiar. If somebody else has the birth record in their possession, that qualifies as familiar. It says right here, familiar. Fair or reasonable knowledge of. If you have the knowledge, if you have that record in your possession, it's called knowledge or information. If you possess that knowledge, you are familiar. You are familiar. So it says, or acquaintance with, closeness, or intimacy. I'm going to go to acquaintance real quick, just for the heck of it. Acquaintance. ACQ. Hopefully it's in here. I'm not sure if it is. Acquainted. Okay, acquainted is all that's in here. So let's see what acquainted means. Having personal, familiar knowledge of a person, event, or thing. Well, obviously the person would be the title. The event is the moment in time or the happening itself, or the thing, which would be the DNA. Let's go over that again. Acquainted, having personal, familiar knowledge of a person, the title, an event, the happening itself, or a thing, the subject or the matter itself. Person is subject, event is happening, or thing, the very matter, the substance. Acquaintance expresses less than familiarity, less than intimacy. But it does say over here, familiar says intimacy under the definition of familiar. Acquaintance is less than familiar. Acquaintance springs from occasional intercourse, which means business, by the way. The familiar from daily intercourse, intimacy from unreserved intercourse. It's all business. It's all business. To be personally acquainted with and to know personally are equivalent terms. That's interesting. So they're actually saying intercourse because intercourse means business, but then you turn around and say to be personally acquainted with and to know personally are equivalent. So they're actually separating personal from business acquaintance. Isn't that interesting? Anyway, let's keep going here. That birth certificate, an affiant or an affidavit of an affiant who states that he or she is familiar with the facts recited, stating that the party named in said certificate is the same party as one of the owners named in said certificate of title. And that thereafter the registrar of title shall treat said registered owner. This is amazing, people. Shall treat said registered owner as having attained the age of majority. Finally, you've moved off day one at a date 18 years after the date of birth shown by said certificate. So by doing this Rule 220 and stating that you're one of the owners, registered owners on that record, on that certificate, it says that registrar of title shall treat said registered owner, which would be that first, middle, last, with the birth date, that's the owner they're speaking of, as having attained the age of majority at a date 18 years. So automatically you would add 18 years to September 78. That's at least the age of majority. So let's just do what majority means. I probably went through this already, but it's very important. Majority, in fact, I know I did. Majority, full age, legal age, the age at which, by law, a person is entitled to the management of his own affairs. Now, does that sound like anybody has any administrative authority over you at all anymore? Any managerial or administrative authority. It says is entitled. A person is entitled. Do you realize that if you're running from that name, if you're running from the person, Kurt, the person's horrible. If you run from that person, you can never attain the age of majority, which means that you can never actually become entitled to the management of your own affairs. And by the way, the word affair means business. And it says, and to the enjoyment of civic rights. Do you realize that until you do this, you are civilly dead? Civilly dead. If you've never attained the age of majority, I don't care chronologically how old you are. You can be 90 years old and not attain the age of majority because you have to claim that first moment. You have to claim that moment in time, that happening, that alpha moment. You have to claim it. A 90-year-old man has never reached the age of majority unless he claims the first moment, that first breath, and fills himself with the Spirit of God. In other words, a 90-year-old man is still reliving the summer. He's never been born. It's Groundhog Day. It's Live, Die, Repeat with Tom Cruise, which is another movie where they're reliving the same day over and over until they get it right. What's amazing about that one, though, is they all die on the beach, just like all the sperm die when they hit the beach of the ovum. Only one gets through. All the other seamen, all the other Navy men, all the other sperms die on the beach. But anyway, that's a movie called Live, Die, Repeat. Again, age of majority. 220 says that the registrar of title shall treat said registered owner as having attained the age of majority at a date 18 years after the date of birth shown by said certificate. Majority, full age, legal age, the age at which by law a person is entitled. So if you don't have a person, this can't happen. But it says a person is entitled to the management of his own affairs and to the enjoyment of civic rights, meaning you're no longer civilly dead. The opposite of minority. What's another concept of minority? Less than 50% of anything. Less than 50% of a quantity. Remember, there are 3 different things that come out of mother's womb. Baby, genuine baby, fetal afterbirth tissue, maternal afterbirth tissue. Basically, they're all equal. 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. If you don't pull yourself together by doing a Minnesota Rule 220, you're always a minority. You're always in the minority because the afterbirth has 2/3 of a vote. They win every time. And so whoever's administrating the afterbirth wins. You have no say in it at all. minority. This is not about the black man. It's about pulling yourself together. Nothing has ever been about the black man. No offense. It's always been about the person of color. Hell, the whole Civil War is about the person of color. It has nothing to do with the biological black man. A person of color. A corporation. They just got everybody to agree to it. They could never get anybody to agree to be murdered in the name of a corporation, but have people start siding with each other on the rights of another living being. That's pretty easy. All we have to do is get everybody to believe that they're fighting for slavery, when in reality they're fighting for persons of color, corporations. So when we establish, persons of color, corporations, they're going to have the same equal rights as a living being. There's your Civil War, people. Majority. Again, also the status of a person who is a major in age. The greater number, the number greater than half of any total. Baby's only worth 1/3. Major. Again, it's on page 860. Major, a person of full age. One who is no longer a minor. One who has attained the management of his own concerns and the enjoyment of his civic rights. Major, greater or larger. Huh. That's pretty amazing. So again, the registrar of titles shall treat said registered owner as having attained the age of majority at a date 18 years after the date of birth shown by said certificate. You know what's really strange about, I started thinking about this last night, and I probably thought about it before. The birth, the date of birth, 60, I was put into a birth. A birth. I mean, a ship, a vessel, can, it has its own slip or its own place. It's like having a space within at a dockyard or whatever. I mean, if I'm flying the flag of the United States of America and my vessel is part of the United States, then within the United States I have a space. I have a place. They have a place for me. So when my vessel comes in, I can pull it into my berth in the United States of America and be welcomed with open arms. But the other concept of a birth is what I started thinking about last night. And this is where it got kind of weird even for me. The concept of a birth. I'm going to go to birth, but I'm going to spell it a little different. I'm going to spell it as a B-E-R-T-H. And this is what was kind of weird. At birth, this is, right off the bat, this comes up for definition. A ship's allotted place at a wharf or a dock. Okay. 2, a fixed bed or bunk on a ship, train, or other means of transport. The verb is a berth, meaning a passenger ship provide a sleeping place for someone, a berth, a place to sleep, or moor a ship in its allotted place. But look at this. The birth date, September 9th, is it possible that on September 19th, 1960, that was the time that I went to sleep in a berth? Is it possible that that's another way to look at this, that we've been sleeping away in this fantasy world, this fiction? Is it possible that we've actually just basically been lulled to sleep in a berth? Is it possible that the birth does mean exactly that, where we're just asleep forever until we truly do awaken to reality? Is it possible? I'm just asking. A berth is a ship's allotted place at a wharf or dock. I understand that, so the ship comes in and has its berth. But it says a fixed bed. A fixed bed. I think I've used the word bed a couple of times. as far as sediment and things like that. In fact, I bet we see it again tonight. A fixed bed or bunk on a ship, train, or other means of transport. A place to sleep. Anyway, so the notice, you finally come alive, people. 18 years after that birth date, I finally wake up. I finally awaken, at least 18 years. They're saying right here that having attained the age of majority at a date 18 years after the date of birth shown by said certificate. So that would be 1978. Believe it or not, that's the year I graduated high school. So I finally wake up and graduate high school. But ultimately, they're giving me that because now it's been 56 years. So they say you finally woke up and now you catch up. The alpha moment is the first moment plus 18 years, and now you get the rest of your life as well because I've been awake now. But what's really strange about it, it says, shall treat the registered owner as having attained the age of majority at a date 18 years after the date shown by said certificate. What happened to the first 18 years? Where'd they go? Where did they go? Who owned those? So, in other words, the first 18 years just disappear? Is that what happens? As if they never occurred? Anyway, so now let's get to my affidavit. By the way, what are the documents that I have in this packet that I recorded on this 16th of December? Well, I have the notice. That's the actual recording. The name of the recording is notice. And then I have right behind that the affidavit, which is on the back side of my notice. I print front back when I can. I have a copy of the Winnebago, Illinois Certification of Vital Record, which is called a Certificate of Live Birth, and that was a certified copy. They won't accept anything less than a certified copy on the record. I was lucky enough to have the original certification of birth registration, the original one, which came out in 1965, May 5th of 1965. They sent that to my parents. What's really interesting about that is it says it's from the state of Illinois and Winnebago County. It's a certification of birth registration. And this is the first time, by the way, that the all-caps Curtis Richard Kallenbach was ever seen. This is the first time. So it says this is to certify that according to records on file in this office, that all caps Curtis Richard Kallenbach, which says full name of child at birth. Are they talking about me? Well, hell no, they're not. They're talking about a commercial vessel, a commercial child. But it goes on to say the sex is male, was born September 19th, 1960, at Rockford, all upper and lower case, Winnebago County, Illinois, upper and lower case. Name of father, Richard Franklin Kallenbach. Father's age 22, birthplace Rockford, Illinois, but it's not Illinois IL cap. It's ILL period, the old abbreviation for Illinois itself. Maiden name of mother, Mary Ann Pappas, which is interesting. Why would they put the maiden name of my mother on this? But it says mother's age 21. Birthplace again, Rockford, Illinois, ILL period. Date of filing, October 6, 1960. So this character, this vessel, this child, this creation of the state was filed on October 6, 1960. That's what, about 15 days? How many days are in September? I was born on the 19th, and this was filed on the 6th of October, about 15 days later. It says child's birth number, blah, 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 in witness whereof the seal of the clerk of the county court of Winnebago County, state of Illinois, has been affixed hereto the 5th of May, 1965. It does say AD, by the way. 5th day of May, AD, Anno Domini, 1965. Isn't that interesting? On the birth record itself, it doesn't say Anno Domini. So for Curtis Richard Kallenbach, the certificate of live birth does not have AD. It does not have Anno Domini. Interesting. But on the all caps vessel, the all-caps vessel. It has 5th day of May, A.D. 1965. So they brought in the Gregorian calendar. So that is the certification of birth registration. That's the first time that anybody had seen all-caps Curtis Richard Kallenbach, and it was 5 years after I was born. The next page I had was a Illinois state or state of Illinois certification of birth record that was issued from the state. And it's still called a certificate of live birth, but it's interesting because the child's name on this one is all caps Curtis Richard Kallenbach. So I put this in there because I wanted them to see in my recording that the child's name on the certificate of live birth issued on 1960 was Curtis Richard Kallenbach, upper and lowercase, that the birth registration issued on May 5th of Anno Domini 1965 was all caps, and that the state-issued certificate of live birth was all caps Curtis Richard Kallenbach as well. So that was in there. I want to put on the record what it is I'm trying to convey, not convey to them, but to get across to the public, so to speak. And then behind that, I actually have the certificate of assumed name from Minnesota, which again, the assumed name is Curtis Richard Kallenbach, all caps. The principal place of business, I just put my postal shop address, which is my business address, by the way. The name holder is Kallenbach, Curtis Richard. So that's in there. And then right behind that is basically the file signature of Steve Simon, the Secretary of State of Minnesota, which this particular page has the work item number and the original file number for the state of Minnesota. And then behind that, I actually put the business record details in as well on the record because I wanted the record to show the status of active in good standing as of 12/2/2016. So I wanted that good standing to be on the record. I wanted that on the record because I don't like them to have to do any more work at all. So now let's go back to my affidavit. By the way, I don't have any problem if people use my stuff verbatim if they know what they're doing. I think it's really dumb to try to I mean this, I think it's really dumb to try to fancy your shit up. Remember, don't use 7 words when 4 will do. Don't try to fancy it up with all the patriot mythology. I've done it myself, but it doesn't make any sense. Cut all the fat off of it, cut all the belief systems off of it, and just do business. Get it down to exactly what you're trying to get across. Don't add any nonsense at all, or any beliefs at all. So my affidavit, and again, it's not an affidavit, it's an affidavit. It says, I, Curtis, belonging wholly to the house and home of Kallenbach Pappas. Why would I put that in there? Because I am tying together. First of all, they say that a house and a home are different. The home is where the heart is. The home is where your heart is. A house is your father's name. So what I did is I'm saying belonging wholly to the house and home, meaning real estate. The house on the land, not removed from the land. And like my buddy Kyle told me years ago, that when that house is not attached, when it is not part of the foundation upon the land, if it's lifted up off of its foundation, it is no longer real estate. It's personal property. It becomes chattel property. So now your father's name becomes chattel. If it's not connected, if the house and the land are not connected. So I said house and home because I know that home is where the heart is, and heart is located on the land of it's the land of my soul, which is my physical body. But and of course my father's name is the title, and so when those two are bound together, it's real estate. So that's why, I mean, just something that simple. I, Curtis, belonging wholly to the house and home of Kallenbach Pappas. As affiant, I use the very word that they say that I have to use. In Minnesota 220, it says, said birth certificate, an affidavit of an affiant. I'm actually saying, as affiant, I'm qualifying myself as the affiant, which is required. For Kallenbach, comma, Curtis Richard. Why would I do that? Why wouldn't, I mean, I already identified myself as I, Curtis, but I'm now the affiant for Kallenbach, comma, Curtis Richard. Why? Because I know that Kallenbach is the name of the title, or the name of the file, or the name of the authority, or the name of the father. And by putting the comma in there, I'm identifying the lineage, the succession. I'm identifying it. The father, comma, the son, which is Curtis, followed by the baptismal name, which is the Holy Ghost. So in this order, for those people that are looking at it, Kallenbach, comma, Curtis Richard is Father, Son, Holy Ghost. Mind, body, spirit. Also, Kallenbach, comma, separates Kallenbach from the rest. Curtis Richard, I could probably live with Curtis Richard. Proper name is really just Curtis. But Curtis Richard I could live with. But I can't live with Curtis Richard Kallenbach because that's not a name at all. That's a title. So again, Kallenbach, comma, Curtis Richard. There is no middle name, by the way, in Kallenbach, comma, Curtis Richard. Richard isn't a middle name anymore, is it? In fact, the comma separates Kallenbach off, so now you just have Curtis Richard. So there's two names there. There's no middle name when there's two names. There would have to be a third name to create the middle position. Anyway, so it says, as affiant for Kallenbach, comma, Curtis Richard, DBA Curtis Richard Kallenbach. Doing business as Curtis Richard Kallenbach. Comma, am familiar. Well, why would I put that in there? Because Minnesota 220 says to do so. It says, set birth certificate and affidavit of an affiant who states that he or she is familiar. Well, why not do exactly as they're telling you to do instead of create your own nonsense and maybe a little more confusion? So it says, am familiar. Is there anybody more familiar than with that DNA that left behind chorion or that left behind fetal tissue than me? Well, hell no. Not only, I mean, intimate, are you kidding me? It's the same damn DNA exactly. You can't get any more intimate than that. Am familiar with the facts recited in the following memorials. I used plural. Why? Because I'm using both authenticated records at this point. But I'm identifying the records that were in the hands of at this moment. When I wrote this, remember that all my stuff was in the hands of the alien property custodian. They still had both authenticated records. They had the authenticated record for the live birth record for Curtis Richard Kallenbach, upper and lowercase. They also had the authenticated certification of birth record for all caps Curtis Richard Kallenbach. So they had both of those in their possession at the federal level. So I said, I am familiar with the facts recited in the following memorials, and I said previously recognized as outstanding. Why would I say that? Because when they were in the hands of the federal government, when they were in the hands of the alien property custodian, when they were in the hands of the Attorney General of the United States of America, they were no longer outstanding. They were where they belonged at the time. So they weren't outstanding because they have to be outside the United States to be outstanding. And when they had it in their possession, it was not outstanding. Outstanding is outside the gate, outside the yard, outside of your jurisdiction. But when I gave it to them, it was no longer outstanding. Now remember, when I wrote this based upon also what it says here. It says here, again, birth certificates. The Registrar of Titles is authorized to receive for registration of memorials upon any outstanding certificate of title. It's outstanding, just like I told you. Outstanding is one of my favorite words. I'm going to go to it again tonight real quick. I don't want to beat this dead horse too much tonight. But outstanding, again, it's such a powerful word. I do have a couple other things I want to cover tonight, so I don't want to be stuck on this very simple stuff. And remember, this is simple. Let's see, outstanding. There it is. Remaining undischarged. So it says the following memorials previously recognized as outstanding. Outstanding says remaining undischarged, unpaid, uncollected. See, what I'm doing is I'm actually collecting the DNA. I've actually laid claim to it. That's a recollection. To recollect, it's a recollection. It's a memory. Remember that if I remember something, if I finally remember it, do I need something to help me remember it, which is what's called a memorial? Why are there memorials in cemeteries? What are those stones for? They're called memorials, but what are they there for? To help us remember those who have come before us. Those memorials are to help us remember. They're markers to help us remember those that came before us. So they're just for our memory, in memory of. Hell, half the stones in the cemetery even say that, in memory of. So again, it says outstanding, remaining undischarged, unpaid, uncollected. Uncollected means uncollected. If I recollect or recollect, I remember. If I remember, I'm pulling myself together. To remember is to reattach. I'm pulling that chorion back into my world. I'm pulling the minor into the major. I just became the age of majority. It's a recollection. It's a remembering. Okay. So that's the outstanding side of it. So previously recognized as outstanding. By the way, isn't it funny when you get arrested, you can be let go on your own recognizance? Does anybody know what a recognition is? What to be recognized is? I'm going to go to recognize real quick. Shoot, I didn't think I was going to do this tonight. I was hoping I didn't have to, but recognize, cognizance. To cognize, to think about. Okay, recognize. Here it is. Recognize, to try, to examine in order to determine the truth of the matter. Does it really say that, Kurt? Yes. Page 1143 Blacks. It says to try. Isn't that interesting? In the courtroom, isn't that what they're doing? It says to examine in order to determine the truth of the matter. The truth of the matter is to recognize. What's the truth of the afterbirth matter? Well, the truth of that matter is that it's twofold. There's two separate claimants. There's two separate owners of the afterbirth. But the moment I pull myself out of the afterbirth, the truth of the matter now is it's just my mother's. So once I claim my position, once I remember the afterbirth, then all that's left as waste material is my mother's. It's not, I'm no longer a waste case. How about this? Recognized, actual and publicly known. Publicly known. So in other words, if I leave that stuff, that uncollected stuff out there, undischarged stuff, it's stuck in the public. It becomes a public easement, subject to public rules and regulations, public law. It says actual and publicly known. Knowledge, public knowledge. Is your knowledge, should your DNA be out in the public? Should it actually be claimed by the public? Should the public have that knowledge in their possession? No. Your DNA can't get any more private than that. Unless you want your shit to be in the public pool, which is where your DNA is right now, through the afterbirth, through the unclaimed, undischarged afterbirth, it's in the public pool. You know, in the movie Minority Report, Minority Report. With Tom Cruise, he lost his son, and his son disappeared in one of the opening scenes in the public pool. His son disappeared, and the movie's even called Minority Report. Minority Report. And his son was lost in the public pool. We're lost in the public pool until we reclaim our position. We're lost. By the way, I did go over the word pool a couple weeks ago. Okay, so let's keep going here. It says, I am familiar with the facts recited in the following memorials previously recognized as outstanding, which is the United States of America Department of State Authenticated Certificate of Live Birth for Curtis Richard Kallenbach. That's upper and lowercase. That's the live birth record. I'm talking about Illinois here, by the way. California only has one record, so don't worry about it. It says the United States of America Department of State Authenticated Certification of Birth Record for Curtis Richard Kallenbach, which is the all caps name. I had both of those authenticated. It says now in the fiduciary care per Title 50 U.S.C. of the Department of Justice, Attorney General, and the Alien Property Custodian. In other words, they still had it in their possession. When I wrote my affidavit, they still had all that stuff. But because I know Rule 220 doesn't require the authenticated records, I wanted to get moving on this. It says now in the fiduciary care, blah, blah, blah. And then I put in the registered letter number. Why did I do that? Because, again, we went over what I had in my registered letter to the APC. I mean, I had my forensic lab results, my personal profile. That was in that letter. And so by referencing the letter in my affidavit, it's like pulling all the material that was in the letter that was in possession of the alien property custodian, in possession of the Attorney General, by referencing that letter and giving them the reason why it's in their hands per Title 50. And I said fiduciary care. What I really did is I said, in essence, in my affidavit, it was also in this packet. By referencing that letter, everything in that letter was now in this affidavit. It's sort of a virtual paper trail. And then here's probably the most important. I know this is actually outside of Minnesota Rule 220. This is outside of it. I mean, it tells you what to do. It says it right there in the rules. But I went one step further, and they did it for a reason. Because I wanted them to know that I knew. And so it says, as the genuine baby, and one of only 2 owners named in said certificate. By the way, how come I said 2? You should know this by now. Are there 2 owners named in said certificates? Well, yeah. If I look at the birth records and know full well that there's property of my mother and property of me, and my mother's name is on the birth record as well as mine. When I look at the birth records, it says Curtis Richard Kallenbach in the born date or the born time. It has the father's name, Richard Franklin Kallenbach, and then it has mother's full maiden name, Mary Ann Pappas. This record is an event. It's the record of an event, something that happened. What happened? A bunch of stuff came out of my mother's womb. Baby, fetal tissue, maternal tissue. Does my mom have a claim on anything that came out of there? Yes, she does. So does she have a claim on the event? Yes, she does. So are there 2 owners to this record? Yes, there is. The problem is that the name of the record is Curtis Richard Kallenbach. That's the title to the record. When I do this Rule 220, I'm taking the title. This is the title bout. It's like a heavyweight championship. It's a title bout. Winner take all. Sedeke Vai, 1666. Let me grab it here. By the way, I jokingly was talking about, as I do these calls like this, I have paper all the way around me like a drum set. Seriously, I have paper all the way around, like a circle around me. I could turn anywhere and grab a record, grab a file, grab something that I need. So don't think that I'm just remembering all this. I might remember what I'm trying to find, but I'm circled, I'm surrounded in paper right now as I sit here. Anyway, Sedeke Vi's Act 1666. What does it say again? It says in Section 4, if the supposed dead man prove to be alive, then the title is revested. Action for mean profits with interest. Look at this. Let me read this. I never did do this, by the way. This is kind of hard because it's in an old English style of writing, so I stumble bad enough because I'm a product of the Rockford Public Schools. But it says, provided always that if any person or persons shall be evicted out of any lands or tenements by virtue of this act, and afterwards, if such person or persons upon whose life or lives such estate or estates depend shall return again from beyond the seas, or shall on proof in any action to be brought for recovery of the same to be made appear to be living, or to have been living at the time of the eviction, that then and from thenceforth the tenant or lessee who was outed of the same, his or their executors, administrators, or assigns shall or may re-enter, repossess, have hold, and enjoy the said lands or tenements in his or their former estate for during the life or lives or so long term as said person or persons upon whose life or lives the said estate or estate shall depend be living, and also shall upon action or actions to be brought by him or against the lessors, reversioners, or tenants in possession or other persons respectively, which since the time of the said eviction received the profits. In other words, whoever's running this thing receive the profit of said lands or tenements, recover for damages the full profits of the said lands or tenements respectively, with lawful interest for and from the time that he or they were outed of the said lands or tenements, and kept or held out of the same by said lessors, reversioners, or tenants, or other persons who after said eviction received the profits of said lands or tenements, or any of them respectively, as well as in the case when said person or persons upon whose life or lives such estate or estates did depend are or shall be dead at the time of bringing said action or actions, as if the said persons or persons were then living. What this says, and by the way, this is at T-Cloud under the Sedeke V Act. By the way, it's pronounced Sedeke Vi. Okay? So anyway, it says, if the supposed dead man proved to be alive, then the title is revested. Action for mean profits with interest. So when you prove life through Minnesota Rule 220, you get your name back. And when you get that title, Curtis Richard Kallenbach in my case, when that title comes to me, it no longer is upon or in a trust. It's no longer attached or can be claimed by whoever picked up the waste material, the horse poop, or who recovered the shipwreck, or whatever story they're telling us. But there is two claimants to the waste material, me and Mom, until somebody makes a claim. But my mom can never claim my property, and I can never claim my mom's property. The problem is there's one title, Curtis Richard Kallenbach, over both pieces of property until somebody makes a claim. There's your split title. There's your trust. And it is not true. Curtis Richard Kallenbach is not the name of my mother's material. So what do I have left here? Still on the affidavit. So what that last sentence where it says, as the genuine baby, as one of only two owners, named only two owners. By the way, in everything I've gone over the last 5 weeks, I always went back to ownership, the owner itself. Everything they do says, hey, listen, when the true owner shows up, all bets are off, everything's gone. But what they do is they gloss over the owner aspect of it really quick, and they get into all the potential claimants because that's their whole world. Their whole world is based upon us not claiming our DNA, us not claiming our bodies. So where everybody on planet Earth is nobody. Nobody. We're all spirits. We're all ghosts. Remember, a body without a spirit is a cadaver, and a spirit without a body is a ghost. As the genuine baby, and one of only 2 owners named in said certificates of title, it was never my intent. Intent is everything. You cannot abandon something if it's not your intent. You cannot abandon. You have to know what you're doing. I don't want any of that crap. You know what? You can have it. I was just going to throw it out, but go ahead and take it. Would anybody do that with their DNA? I was just going to throw that out anyway. I'm nobody. I prefer to be nobody, like all those other idiots out there that are running from their father's name. I prefer to be nobody. I prefer to not make a claim on any of my stuff. As a genuine baby and one of only 2 owners named in said certificates of title, it was never my intent to leave such valuable industrial property behind to become derelict, treasure trove, or res nullius. I'm going to go over those 3 again. It was never my intent to leave such valuable, by me saying that, there's no possible way somebody can imply or infer that I did it with intent. It was never my intent to leave such valuable industrial property. What's industrial property? My capital, my labor, and my genetics. Behind to become derelict. What is derelict? Derelict. Forsaken. This is, by the way, page 399. Blacksmith, as usual. Derelict, forsaken, abandoned, deserted, cast away. Personal property abandoned or thrown away by the owner in such a manner as to indicate that he intends to make no further claim thereto. Intends to make no further claim. I just said right here that it was never my intent to leave such valuable industrial property behind. That automatically precludes, or it stops any potential. I wrote this. This is an affidavit. I signed my name to it. Dereliction or renunciation of property at sea as well as on land requires both the intention to abandon and external action. A boat or vessel found entirely deserted or abandoned on the sea without hope or intention of recovery or return by the master or crew, whether resulting from wreck, accident, necessity, or voluntary abandonment. By the way, and again, mother's DNA represents mother. It's mom's, the afterbirth DNA, the maternal afterbirth is mother's DNA. I mean, it's exactly the same as my mom. My mom is the vessel I was traveling in. So when she leaves behind a piece of that ship, a piece of that vessel, the presumption is that that maternal afterbirth, the ship I came in on, is a shipwreck. Because when mom leaves the scene, all that's left is some broken pieces of ship. Because the maternal afterbirth is a wreck as well. There's no form to that material. It's a wreck. It's a wreck. So real quick, just for fun, I'm going to go to the word wreck again. Because that's what maternal afterbirth is, a wreck. It says to destroy, to disable, to seriously damage. I mean, if you look at my mother, by the way, she was beautiful, but if you looked at my mother, and you looked at the maternal afterbirth, and you looked at both of those side by side, you'd go, well, that stuff on the floor, that mess on the floor is a wreck. It's certainly disabled, and God knows it's damaged. I mean, if you looked at my mother and the maternal afterbirth side by side, one is a wreck and one is a living being. Perfect. Because we're all perfect. It says to reduce to a wreck or ruinous state by any kind of violence overthrow, shatter, or destroy, to cause, to crash, or suffer ruin, synonymous with ruin, smash, and demolish. I mean, can you imagine what that afterbirth looks like? Does it really look like any person you've ever seen in your life? No. It says goods cast ashore by the sea and not claimed by the owner within a year or other specified period is a wreck. What I'm getting at, look at this, maritime law. Maritime law. A ship becomes a wreck when in consequence of injuries received, she is rendered absolutely unnavigable or unable to pursue her voyage without repairs exceeding the half of her value. Is there any way to repair the afterbirth, to make it into a person? I'm joking here, but I really want you to think about this. Is it possible to repair the afterbirth and make it into a whole man or woman? Of course not. Well, maybe they can. Maybe by taking and scooping it up and putting it into the public pool, they can have their version of Frankenstein. Maybe that's the best they can do. One giant beast, one giant collective. So that's derelict. What is treasure trove? I use the word treasure trove. By the way, isn't it funny how they have you sign next to the X where treasure's always located? On the beach, where pirates are always burying it? On the beach. Treasure trove. Treasure trove. Literally, treasure found. Remember, one man's trash is another man's treasure? That is not the waste material, is not the afterbirth considered trash or waste? Literally, treasure found. Money or coin, gold, silver, plate, or bullion found hidden in the earth or other private place, the owner thereof being unknown. You know, that's the sad part about this. They're saying that the owner's unknown only because the owners never come forward. They always know whose property that is left behind. Every single, 100% of the cases, they know whose it is. But they do have plausible deniability because it's both mom and baby's property. So they really don't know whose realistically. They could say, well, we don't know whether it's baby's or it's mother's or what. Of course, scientifically, they do know whose it is, but that, you know, we're splitting hairs here. It says, called finder of treasure trove is entitled thereto as against owner of the land where such treasure is found in all the world, save the true owner. In other words, when the true owner comes forward, they get it. It all ends. This nightmare ends when we all step forward and lay claim to what is rightfully ours. It was never my intent to leave such valuable industrial property behind to become derelict, treasure trove, or res nullius. Res nullius. I know what it means. You probably remember what it means, but I'm going to read it one last time. Res nullius. The property of nobody. Res nullius, the property of nobody. A thing which has no owner, either because a former owner has finally abandoned it, or because it has never been appropriated by any person, or because in the Roman law it is not susceptible of private ownership. And let's think about this maternal afterbirth one last time before I move on. The maternal afterbirth, it truly is an amazing thing, because without it, we don't survive the journey. Remember, the maternal afterbirth is everything that mother creates to make sure we have the nutrients and oxygen and everything else that gets to baby. Remember, the zygote is baby. The zygote is baby and baby DNA. But mother creates the very thing that allows baby to get to this new world alive. So that birth, that afterbirth, the maternal afterbirth material is what gets us here. Without it, we don't make it. And then it is sacrificed. It does give its life, so to speak, so that we may live, which is the story of Jesus. And the maternal afterbirth has no biological father, so it is born of a virgin. Because no man planted a seed in the woman and to create that particular born alive material. It really is an immaculate conception. Of course, immaculate means perfect and conception means idea, but it also can mean immaculate conception biblically where there is no biological or male father. And that's what the maternal afterbirth is. It truly is the Jesus fish. It is the Jesus. It is the vessel that keeps us alive, that was sacrificed so that we could get to the new world. Okay. Done rambling? I want to do something. Well, let me see. Let me just tie some loose ends up now with these documents. This stuff is not hard, people. Don't overthink it. So what did I do? Don't think about anything I've ever done in the past other than this particular notice right here. The notice is Minnesota Rule 220 itself. That's the notice. I'm letting the county know, the state know, the world know that I know Minnesota Rule 220. I follow the rules of Minnesota Rule 220 almost exactly and write an affidavit based upon Minnesota Rule 220. I didn't go outside of it at all. Even the last sentence was barely. I added that, but not much. There's not much there. All I added was as the genuine baby and one of only 2 owners named in said certificates. By the way, it does say that. I'm identifying myself as one of the owners. It was never my intent to leave such valuable industrial property behind. I know what it is. So do you now. What is the industrial property? What's the potential industrial property? Remember, there are 3 biological products of mother's womb: genuine baby, fetal tissue, and maternal tissue. Those are 3 separate, distinct products that come out of mother's womb. But what else does mother leave behind? She leaves behind, as an author, the title to maybe a new story, a new timeline. And that title is Curtis Richard Kallenbach. So when she put pen to paper and filled out some of those forms, she also created Curtis Richard Kallenbach, the title. So that's 4 things left. There's 3 things left behind because, remember, baby goes home with mom and dad. But the fetal tissue stays at the hospital, undischarged, I may add, outstanding, undischarged. The maternal tissue stays at the hospital, outstanding, undischarged. And Curtis Richard Kallenbach, the title. That didn't go home with mom and dad either. So the title is left behind as well. That's important stuff. So I noticed Minnesota 220. That's page 1. Page 2 was my affidavit. Page 3 was my certificate of live birth that I received from the county. Page 4 was the certification of birth registration, the little card that very few people have, so don't worry if you don't have it. But it's the first, it's the registration of the vessel. I'm not talking about baby, I'm talking about the registration of the ship of state. Page, I guess it would be page 5, I added the certification of birth record, which is the certificate of live birth from Illinois, because I wanted to show that even though the county issued one with upper and lowercase Curtis Richard Kallenbach, the newer version issued from the state is all caps, more like the registration that I received in 1965. So I put that in there. I'm thinking about what I'm trying to accomplish. I'm trying to get them to see it my way, so I have to evidence everything I have, everything I think. I have to evidence it. You can't say, again, if wishes were horses, beggars would ride. Just because you want it to be true doesn't make it true. And truth is not relevant when all they care about are facts. They only care about facts. If you can't prove it, SOL. 6th page is the Minnesota Secretary of State Certificate of Assumed Name. 7th page was the actual signature page of the assumed name, and the 8th page was the business record details of that Minnesota assumed name certificate, which has the status active in good standing on it, which is the only reason I put it in there. Some of you, if you're lucky enough, and you have the certificate from Minnesota with the border on it, you could use that. If you go ahead and you run it in the legals and you get the certificate of publication, you could put that in there. I didn't have any of this stuff, but I would today. Again, I'm thinking if I would have had this stuff, what would I have done? I would have added a couple things. If I didn't already record the DNA, the personal DNA profile, that would have been in here. If I would have had the old baby footprint document, that would have been in here. You got to think, what are you trying to accomplish? But ultimately, the only thing you really need, would be, I believe you need the notice. I believe you need to let them know about Minnesota Rule 220. The affidavit is the only reason you're doing this. You need the live birth record because it needs to be attached to the affidavit. You need that. And I believe you also need the assumed name certificate because what you're doing is you're tying the man, the living man now. Remember, when a man proves life, he's revested with his title. So now you have the man and his title. But what else do you have now? You also have the last third. The last third, which is mother's property, which has the name of mother's property. The name of that ship is the all caps name. That's the all caps name, I believe. So now you have all of it. You've claimed everything by using the Minnesota Rule 220. It proves life. It proves life. The assumed name is you basically taking control of the commercial vessel, and now you're in good standing. If you don't have a registered assumed name, you cannot ever deal properly with the courts because you have no standing. You don't have the word they use is status, but it says active in good standing. So now you can speak for yourself. You have reached the age of majority, plus you have your vessel under your control, the ship of state under your control. I look at it this way. It's like a man walking down the sidewalk with a dog on a leash. The man is obviously alive. The dog is the vessel in commerce, and the leash is the registration. So you have a living man walking his dog on a leash. That's the way I look at this. If the dog is not registered to you, then whose dog is it? Is there any evidence of whose dog it is? If the dog bites somebody, somebody's going to get in trouble. Again, a man, a living man, there's your Minnesota Rule 220, which satisfies the Sedekevai Act of 1666. So now there's the living man revested with his title. And now, commercially, you have a dog to use in the show, a dog to use in the game, a dog to use on the Monopoly board. And it's registered to you, which is the dog on a leash that's in your hand. One more time. There's a man walking his dog down the sidewalk. He's obviously alive because he's walking a dog. Why is he alive? Because he evidenced the fact that he is who he is. And so when he does a Minnesota Rule 220, he's alive in the eyes of everybody now. He's actually claimed the moment of his arrival. So whether he's 18 or 98, he is the age of majority now. And he has total control over his life, and he has his name in his hands because he's revested with the title. But now he also has, by doing a proper assumed name, he has a dog to play with on the Monopoly board. If the dog is not registered to him, then anybody can move the dog. If the dog bites somebody, he's probably going to get in trouble. He needs that dog to be on a leash. The leash is the registration that ties the dog back to you. So there's really only two things here. The living man and his game piece, his dog, his ship. That's it. A man and his dog. A man and his boat. A man and his game piece. But the game piece, the dog, or the boat, whatever you want to call it, whatever you need to see it as, it needs to be registered back to the living man. Otherwise, the living man doesn't have the authority over that dog, game piece, or boat. Sometimes, I feel bad, like I'm somewhat condescending. I'm sure a lot of people think that I am, but I'm not. I can't hear anybody. I don't know where anybody's lost. And I try to say things 100 different ways, just so if it didn't work that way, maybe it'll work this way. At pCloud, I want to finish with this document because I want to have a little fun. This is the last night, obviously, and we only got about 45 minutes. And by the way, you guys can call me. You guys are kind of stuck with me. So call me with questions and things like that. And don't be embarrassed that you're dumb, because you're not dumb. This shit's hard. This shit really is hard. But you can call me. And so any questions about any of this stuff, I don't get mad when people don't get it. I get mad when people presume to get it or they pretend to get it. And they go do dumb things, and then they tell me about it afterwards. That's when I get mad, because I feel like I failed at that point. Let me go over something. I sent you guys earlier tonight, I believe. Let me get to it. I sent you a link to something, but I would rather use a different document. By the way, the link I sent you is amazing. It's absolutely amazing. But at the pCloud, let me go to pCloud real quick and see. It should be pretty easy name. I think I used the name. I renamed it, so it should be pretty easy to find. But I think it's called National Historic Preservation Act. Let me see if it's under National Historic Preservation Act. And it should be, because I renamed it. Let me see. The beautiful thing about pCloud is it is alphabetical. Yeah, National Historic Preservation Act. If you have your computer up, go to it. I want to end with this because it's almost too crazy what they do, what this outfit has done. Because remember, this is just a lot of fun for them. They're writing some absolutely crazy stuff that most people can never see it. But after this much time with me, I'm gonna just go over a couple things here. I'm not going to get very far into it. But I want to go over the first 2 pages of it. And again, it's at pCloud, and it's called National Historic Preservation Act. I'll give you another couple seconds here to get to it. Sometimes I'm blown away by what I'm looking at, because it's too crazy. I find it hard to believe sometimes what I'm looking at. Okay, I'm taking a moment to plug in my phone just so I don't lose you guys. Okay, so let's go over this thing. the National Historic, remember I've been talking about cultural property, about industrial property. Remember, the whole damn thing is about whose property is it and who can prove it. Whose property is it and who can prove it? By the way, it's not bad. If you're registered properly, if that ship of state is registered to you and you're in good standing, that's a really good thing for you. That's a really good place to be, because I believe that vessel is protected. It's completely indemnified. It is completely indemnified. So let's go over this thing, just the first couple pages, but then I'm going to get into something really fun towards the end here, because I know that this is some pretty serious stuff. But let's go through this page 1 and page 2. It says the National Historic Preservation Act became law on October 15, 1966. I was 6 years old. And it was codified in Title 16 of the United States Code. Various amendments followed through the years. On December 19, 2014, it moved from Title 16 to Title 54, with minimal and non-substantive changes to the text of the Act and a reordering of some of its provisions. This document shows the provisions of the Act as they now appear in Title 54 of the United States Code. By the way, I'm going to go over just a little bit of this, but I would really advise everybody to look through this with their eyes and really scrutinize this thing, because it's so amazing what you're looking at. It says the Act's name, National Historic, National. Remember, the nation. What nation are they talking about? What nation are they talking? Are they talking about the Maritime Republic? Are they talking about the nation that FDR created in 1933? Remember, I think they created a nation, a Maritime Republic in 1871 through the Organic Act. I think they created a different nation, a spiritual or a churchyard, a nation, spiritual nation in 1933 with FDR saying today is the day of national consecration, created a consecrated nation, a holy ground nation. I think that's the separation of church and state right there. You have a ship of state and you have a church ground, a deed to churchyard, and that's the separation, which is not good for a living man, by the way. It says the name is found in the notes of the very first section of Title 54. While public law, whatever, did not repeal the Act's findings for editorial reasons, those findings were not included in the text of Title 54. There's always a reason for them to do something or not do something. Just remember that. The findings are still current law. However, rather than citing to the U.S. Code, when referring to the findings, one may cite to Section 1 of the National Historic Preservation Act. I'm going to go down to the third paragraph. It says, finally, the attachment at the end of this document attempts to assist those preservation stakeholders who for many years have referred to the Act's various provisions according to the section numbers used in 1966 public law. But again, stakeholders. Well, you know what? I wasn't going to do this, but what is stakeholder? What is a stakeholder? Having something at stake. So a stakeholder. A deposit. A stake is a deposit made to answer an event. Isn't the birth record a record of an event? So it says a stake is a deposit made to answer an event, as on a wager. It says something deposited by two persons. Does it really say that? Yes, Kurt, it does. Page 1259. Something deposited by two persons with the third on condition that it is to be delivered to the one who shall become entitled to it. I can't believe I'm reading this. The one who shall become entitled to it by the happening of a specified contingency. Oh, now we're talking about the vested or contingent person. What's the document? Here it is right here. Vested or contingent remainders, the perennial enigma. That's a P-Cloud, 1939. A future estate is either vested or contingent. It is vested when there is a person in being who would have an immediate right to the possession of the property on the determination of all intermediate or preceding estates. It is contingent while the person to whom or the event on which it is limited to take effect remains uncertain. A stake is a deposit made to answer an event, as on a wager, something deposited by two persons, with the third on condition that it is to be delivered to one who shall become entitled to it by the happening of a specified contingency. That's Minnesota Rule 220 right there. That's the specified contingency. You got to come forward and claim this stuff. It says a boundary marker used for land survey purposes. That's a stake. It's all about this afterbirth stuff, people. What's a stakeholder? Because that's what I actually came here for. But I'm really pleasantly surprised about the word stake. I hope you do understand that. Stakeholder. Generally, a stakeholder is a third party chosen by two or more persons. Two or more. That would be baby, probably, and mother. Two or more persons to keep on deposit property or money, the right or possession of which is contested between them, mom and baby, and to be delivered to one who shall establish his right to it. And it is one who is entitled to interplead rival or contesting claimants to property or funds in his hands. A person who is or may be exposed to multiple liability as a result of adverse claims. A stakeholder may commence an action of interpleader against two or more claimants. A person with whom money is deposited pending the decision of a bet or wager. His function is to receive the sums wagered and hold them against the determining event. That's whoever's holding the deposit, like a bailiff, whether that event be a horse race or otherwise. And then to pay them over to the winner. Also, a third person chosen by two or more persons to keep in deposit property, the right or possession of which is contested between them, and to be delivered to the one who shall establish his right to it. That's what we're trying to accomplish here, people. Get rid of that fucking trust, or even the whole idea of the trust. There should not be a trust when there's a sole ownership in your life. Staking. Identification of boundaries of a parcel of land by placing stakes in ground at boundary points. Stakeholder, man, I mean, to assist those preservation stakeholders. Preservation stakeholders. Wow. Let's go down to Section 1 here. This is the rewrite right here. It says Section 1 of the National Historic Preservation Act as amended, okay? And it says B. The Congress finds and declares. Finds and declares. Finder and declaration. Those are the roots, the finder and the declaration. So it says the Congress finds and the Congress declares that 1. The spirit and direction of the nation are founded upon the reflected in its historic heritage. Does it really say the spirit and direction of the nation? Remember, what nation are they speaking of? Because Illinois is not part of a nation. Illinois is part of a confederacy. So what nation are they speaking of? And the only one I can think of that when they deal with the word spirit would be the consecrated holy grounds created, that nation that was consecrated in 1933 in FDR's inaugural address. It says the spirit and direction of the nation are founded, think about foundation, land, are founded upon and reflected in its historic heritage. Do we have any claim to our land, our bodies, when we're nobody? If we don't claim the history, our personal histories, if we don't claim our histories, we have no heritage. So look at it, says the Congress finds and declares that the spirit and direction of the nation are founded upon and reflected like an image, reflected in its historic heritage. Well, you're damn well right. 2, the historical and cultural foundation. There's your cultural property right now. The historical and cultural foundations of the nation should be preserved as a living part of our community, life and development, in order to give a sense of orientation to the American people. To give a sense of orientation to the American people, it says the historical and cultural foundations, the body tied to the birth record. The historical and cultural foundations of that nation, that particular nation, that holy ground, should be preserved as the living part. Isn't that what we are? Aren't we the living? We represent the living. 3, historic properties significant to the nation's heritage are being lost or substantially altered, often inadvertently, with increasing frequency. I would say that's absolutely true, because is Kallenbach, Curtis Richard the same property as Curtis Richard Kallenbach, or has that been an alteration? 5, in the face of ever-increasing extensions of urban centers, highways, and residential, commercial, or industrial developments, urban centers, the present governmental and non-governmental historic preservation programs and activities are inadequate to ensure future generations a genuine, that's the firstborn, a genuine opportunity to appreciate and enjoy the rich heritage of our nation. You're damn most right. Nobody without Minnesota Rule 220 is in the position of the baby, the genuine firstborn. Nobody. There's nobody there. Nobody. Genuine means living man. It says future generations a genuine opportunity to appreciate and enjoy the rich heritage of our nation. 6, the increased knowledge. What is knowledge? It's information. What is information? The birth certificate, the birth record. The increased knowledge of our historic resources. Our historic resources. That sounds like a cultural claim to me. The establishment of better means of identifying and administering them, and the encouragement of their preservation will improve the planning and execution of federal and federally assisted projects and will assist economic growth and development. Remember, it's all about the economy. It's all about industrial property. It's all about the value that your raw material is. It's the energy source of the whole system. I hope you recognize a lot of these words, because I'm shocked at reading this. 7, although the major burdens of historic preservation have been borne and major efforts initiated by private agencies and individuals, and both should continue to play a vital role, it is nevertheless necessary necessary and appropriate for the federal government to accelerate its historic preservation programs and activities to give maximum encouragement to agencies and individuals undertaking preservation by private means, and to assist state and local governments and their national trusts. Does it say that? To assist state and local governments and the National Trust for Historic Preservation in the United States to expand and accelerate their historic preservation programs and activities. Ouch. That's all new. That's what's been amended. Let's go. I'm going to do, what time is it? Okay, I still got a lot of time. Good. I'm going to go just to the page 2 there and read just those next 6 lines. It says, 54 U.S.C. Section 3001 policy. Okay, this is policy. It said it is the policy of the federal government, in cooperation with other nations and in partnership with states, local governments, Indian tribes, Native Hawaiian organizations, and private organizations and individuals. 2, number 1, use measures, including financial and technical assistance, to foster, think foster children, foster care, to foster conditions under which our modern society and our historic property, everything yesterday back to the beginning, back to the alpha moment is historic property. Everything from the moment I arrived all the way up until today began. And that's all history. And if I don't claim it, it falls into this policy. It becomes historic property. By the way, it's abandoned by me, but nevertheless, it's going to be picked up and preserved through these kinds of programs. Historic property of the United States. Remember Haslam versus Lockwood. So when that afterbirth material falls to the ground, whether it's eminent domain or treasure trove or trover, the United States picks it up and says, yep, this is ours, at least to use until the true owner shows up. It says, and of the international community of nations and in the administration of the National Preservation Program. National Preservation Program. What would they, think about the preservation of the afterbirth itself. Do they have to keep any of it alive? Or do they just have to store it? If they store it in a freezer, like a cryogenic position, could they actually be calling that? Could they be saying? Remember I talked about the ark last night, and all they need is a sample of your DNA to store it, or a sample in order to have evidence of you and your family. All the animals, all the people on planet Earth, all of their property. Theoretically, could be their DNA could be on one single, in one location, one ark, so to speak. Could that not be considered the Ark of the Covenant, the covenant with God? Could not this one place be saving everybody from themselves in their ark, in their DNA shoebox? Sometimes I think that's what they think they're doing. Preservation, though. National preservation. 3, administer federally owned, administered, or controlled historic property. Administer federally owned, administered, or controlled historic property in the spirit of stewardship for the inspiration and benefit of present and future generations. That is one scary line. Administer federally owned, administered, or controlled historic property in the spirit of stewardship for the inspiration. Inspiration is breath. For the inspiration and benefit. The breath. For the breath and benefit of present or future generations. It's almost like we're on a breathing machine. Thank you, federally owned, federally run programs. Because without you, this iron lung, without that iron lung that you provide me with, I wouldn't be alive today. I'm joking, but look what they're saying here. Spirit of stewardship for the inspiration. Remember, to inspire is to take a breath in. To expire is to breathe out. They're talking about keeping this nation alive through words. Because remember, they're all civilly dead. Everybody's dead. They have no way to speak. So these people are speaking on your behalf. 4, to contribute to the preservation of non-federally owned historic property and give maximum encouragement to organizations and individuals undertaking preservation by private means. Maximum encouragement. That sounds like non-voluntary licensing to me. Maximum encouragement. Non-voluntary licensing agreements. I would say that, the cops are doing a great job with their maximum encouragement for you to use that unregistered property, because it's all about the economy. If you don't lay claim to your stuff, they're going to force you to license it and use it anyway. You might as well register it and stay on the good side of everybody. You might as well register it and fly the flag of the country. 5, encourage the public and private preservation and utilization of all usable elements. Usable. Remember that abuse is non-use? And again, we're back to non-voluntary licensing. It says, encourage the public and private preservation and utilization of all usable elements. Remember, to not use is to abuse. Encourage utilization of all usable elements of the nation's historic built environment, and 6, assist state and local governments, Indian tribes, and Native Hawaiian organizations, and the National Trust, to expand and accelerate their historic preservation programs and activities. The National Trust. I'm going to skip to page, what do I have here? I got about 20 minutes left, and this is going to take all of 20 minutes. I want to go to page 9, and I'm going to end with this because it's so fun. I know this isn't really fun, but it is for me. Page 9, where it says retention of name. Retention of name, page 9. It says, notwithstanding. By the way, I would advise everybody to go to every one of these. When you see 15 U.S.C. or when you see 43C of the Act of July, I would advise you to go look all this stuff up. I do this all the time, but you really need to look it up so you can see it with your own eyes. This paper alone, you read this paper, it's going to blow you away. But look, right above retention of name is owner participation in nomination process. Owner participation in nomination process. I know I don't have time to go through this, but I want to go through the retention of name because it's so interesting. It says, notwithstanding Section 43 of the Act of July 5th, 1946, known as the Trademark Act of 1946, which was 15 U.S.C. 1125C, buildings and structures on or eligible. Again, buildings and structures on or eligible for inclusion on the National Register, either individually or as part of a historic district. Either individually or part of a historic district. Or designated as an individual landmark. And by the way, I think I went over landmark twice. Or designated as an individual landmark. By the way, the word individual is huge. And if you look up legal name, it identifies what style the word an individual is written. But it says individual landmark, or as a contributing building in a historic district by a unit of state or local government, here it is, may retain the name historically associated with the building or structure. May retain the name. Historically. What's my historical name? What is my individual historical name? What is it? But it says may retain the name historically associated with the building or structure. And the first thing that popped into my head is, wait a minute here. I know what the building society is. But I didn't want to go down there I didn't want to end on society or building society with you guys tonight. I wanted to go to the word structure. And structure's on page 1276. Structure. So this is where we're going to go. We're going to end with this stuff here. And again, it's just more. I feel like I am truly beating a dead horse, but it's so eye-opening to see it in their own words. I mean, this is a government. This is right out of the United States Code. I mean, codified at Title 54. It says, structure, page 1276, any construction or any production or piece of work artificially built up or composed of parts joined together in some definite manner. That's a structure. Built up or composed of parts joined together in some definite manner. That which is built or constructed, an edifice or building of any kind. An edifice. Let's go to edifice real quick on Webster's. What is edifice? Edifice. I didn't look at this earlier tonight, so this is going to be interesting to see what I find. Edifice. A building, especially a large, imposing one, a complex, oh, look at this, edifice, a complex system of beliefs. Really, does it say that? A complex system of beliefs. Merriam-Webster, what does Merriam-Webster say? A building, especially a large or massive structure. A large abstract structure. Abstract structure. Wow. So I'm going to go one step further here and go to etymology online and see what edifice is. Etymology online. Edifice. See how old this word is. Edifice. Okay, they're using a building. 14th century is edifice is a building. Building, erect a building. Oh, temple, sanctuary. Usually a single edifice without partitions. Also in the plural. Dwelling house, building. Originally a place with a hearth. A place with a hearth. By the way, the word heart and hearth can be interchanged. It goes on to say to burn. Burst into flames. So edifice, heat, to burn, ash. Okay, edifice. But that's not what I wanted to get into. It says, that which is built or constructed, an edifice or building of any kind. It says a combination of materials. A combination of materials to form a construction for occupancy, use, or ornamentation, whether installed on, above, or below the surface of a parcel of land. So let me read that again. It says a combination of materials to form a construction for occupancy. A combination of materials to form a construction for occupancy. Use or ornamentation, whether installed on, above, or below the surface of a parcel of land. Look at that. On the land, above the land, or below the land. On the land, above the land, or below the land. In the air, on the ground, underground. So I'm going to go to the word parcel because it says on or below the surface of a parcel of land. So I'm going to go to parcel, which is 1002. Parcel. Verb is to divide an estate. To divide an estate. Remember, I'm coming off a structure here, so structure led me to parcel. Parcel, the noun, a small package or bundle. I believe Mom takes a small package or bundle home with her. They used to call it a bundle of joy. A part or portion of land is a parcel. A part or portion of land. A part of an estate. A parcel is used with reference to land generally, means a contiguous quantity of land in the possession of an owner. Contiguous. Is the chorion, when it's in the womb, contiguous with baby? In other words, the zygote is all of my DNA. But when it starts to de-differentiate and the baby, me, splits away, or the chorion, or the, I'll call it the chorion, splits away from the main of the zygote, is that separated material still contiguous with me? Of course it is. But when I come out of the womb, I'm now completely separated from my DNA. I have to remember that DNA, but it says contiguous quantity of land in the possession of an owner. Easements and rights over certain land. A contiguous quantity of land in possession of, owned by, or recorded as property of the same claimant person or company. Let me say that again. So a parcel, a contiguous quantity of land, which is me and my chorion, in possession of, owned by, and recorded, there's your Minnesota Rule 220 affidavit, as property of the same claimant person or company. Term may be synonymous with lot. I think Salem's lot is the maternal afterbirth. Okay, parcel, parcels, plural, a description of property formally set forth in a conveyance together with the boundaries thereof in order to its easy identification. Wow. Parsonary, the state or condition of holding title to lands jointly by parsoners before the common inheritance has been divided. What's a parsoner? A joint heir, one who with others holds an estate in co-parsonary. See, that's the fictitious side of the afterbirth. Co-parsonaries. They're saying that the land, the afterbirth itself, is shared by more than one claimant or parsoner. So, what was another word that I saw in there? The big part of this is the concept of historic district. So I wanted to do one last thing here before we close up for the night. I might ramble for a few more minutes, but historic site. And that's, again, here it says a historic district. He says either individually or as part of a historic district. I went to historic, and I saw historic site. So I read historic site, and that's, by the way, at page 657. It says any building, structure, area, or property. This is a historic site. That's S-I-T-E. Or property that is significant in the history, architecture, archaeology, or culture of a state, its community, or the nation, and has been so designated pursuant to statute. It says such structures cannot be altered without permission of the appropriate authorities. So we, by our negligence or by our not knowing what we have to do, we alter by false claims, by the way. We alter what is rightfully ours, but it says historic site. A historic site is where you were born. I mean, on September 19th, 1960, on the 4th floor of Swedish American Hospital at 3:50 a.m., that was a historic site. Some people might laugh and go, no, it wasn't. It was where you were born. Yeah, but it's historic to me. It's my first moment. It's the point in time. It's where my timeline began, where I took my first breath, called inspiration. That's the moment I arrived here alive. But I never claimed that moment. There were 3 witnesses there. There's a document out there that was signed by those 3 witnesses. And until I lay claim to that moment, I am not here. It says historic site. Any building, structure, area, or property that is significant in the history. I believe that it's significant. That land that showed up that day is very significant in the history, in my history. It says, or culture of a state. Culture. Here's your cultural property. Again, when the afterbirth hits the ground and nobody claims it, it gets picked up through eminent domain or treasure trove or trover until somebody goes back and claims it. It becomes the culture or cultural property of the state. Of the state. And what document is it? Let me see in my drum set here. All property rests in the state. What is that? That would be, where is that? There it is. The ultimate ownership of all property is in the state. Individual so-called ownership is only by virtue of government, i.e. law, amounting to mere user, and use must be in accordance with law and subordinate to the necessities of the state. That is contracts payable in gold, and it is at P. Cloud. I'm reading from page, I don't have any page numbers. It's the next to the last page, but I believe I highlighted it. It's next to the last page for you guys. And it's in yellow. See, there's a yellow highlight there. But that's from Senate, or Contracts Payable in Gold, an article entitled Contracts Payable in Gold. It's 73rd Congress, first session, and the Senate, document number 43. So the state, to be a cultural property to what is exactly like stated in Hassam versus Lockwood, where the horse poop hits the ground, the fee or the holder of the fee, which would be the county or the state, which is the land where the poop fell, where the afterbirth fell, they're making a claim upon it and calling it cultural property. That's the site. It says its communities or the nation has been so designated pursuant to statute. Statute, by the way, is what that birth record becomes. But I want to go to site, S-I-T-E then, historic site. And site is page 1243. Site, a plot of ground suitable or set apart for some specific use. A seat or ground plot. A seat or ground plot. There's your separation of church and state. I know you can't see it yet, but I'm about to describe it. A seat or ground plot. The ground plot is the churchyard or the cemetery lot or the deed to the churchyard itself. That's the church, that's the spirit side of the equation, the body. So it says a site is either a seat or ground plot. The ground plot is the church. It's the body. It says a seat or ground plot. So, Kurt, what the hell is a seat? I'm getting to that, but let me finish this. It says a seat or ground plot. The term does not of itself necessarily mean a place or tract of land fixed by definite boundaries. The term does not of itself necessarily mean a place or tract of land fixed by definite boundaries. Listen, my physical body as I sit here on the floor in front of the fireplace, I have definite boundaries. It's called my skin. It's called my skin. So the boundaries of my existence right here as I speak from this position is my body. From the top of my head to the tips of my toes, the skin is the boundary. But there's some DNA out there outside of my body, which is the afterbirth chorion, the fetal tissue. It's outside the boundary of my body. So my physical body, the one that's spirit-filled, the one speaking to you right now, that is the ground plot side of it. That has the deed, the birth record. But there's another piece that is outside the boundary. So in other words, it's saying, does not of itself necessarily mean a place or tract of land fixed by definite boundaries. Well, I know there's the boundaries of my body, but if there's DNA outside of my body, then there can't be fixed or definite boundaries. There's an extension, something that needs to be added, which is the DNA, the left behind or afterbirth fetal tissue that is outside or beyond myself. So it says a seat or ground plot. The ground plot is the church side of the equation. So what is the seat? That's the state. So let's go to page 212 to see what the word seat means. In other words, I believe the seat is at the right hand of God the Father. Take a seat next to God the Father. Seat. S-E-A-T. Seat. Seat of government. Page 212, the state capital. What is the capital? I've been screaming about this for 5 weeks. Capital and labor. Labor is the body. The body does something. What's the capital? The capital is your mind. Where's your mind located? It's in your head. It says seat of government. This is the state capital. So a seat or ground plot. There's state and church. The state capital or the town within a district or county where the principal government offices and officers are located. County seat. That's your mind, people. That is the state. Ceded land. Land that is occupied, cultivated, improved, reclaimed, farmed, or used as a place of residence. Residence without cultivation or cultivation without residence, or both together, impart to the land the character of being seated. So look at this. When you're all in one place, your seated land. Your seated land. It says land that is occupied. In other words, what is occupancy? What is to occupy means to possess. Land that is occupied, cultivate. That means you have to have your spirit and your mind in that body. You cannot be nobody. Land that is occupied, cultivated, improved, reclaimed. Reclamation. Reclaimed, farmed, or used as a place of residence. Residence without cultivation or cultivation without residence, or both together, impart to the land the character of being seated. Seat of government, the state capital. The state capital. And one last thing here, I'm going to go back to the word house, because I want to show you something about the idea of Heavenly Father or the Father being the government. Remember, the Father is supposed to be the government. No offense, ladies. House. I'm looking up house. Household. A family living together. Those who dwell under the same roof and compose a family. Here it is. A man's family living together constitutes his household, though he may have gone to another state. When the father's name is no longer attached to the land, he has gone to another state. Now you have separation of church and state. And that's what's so weird about this thing here. The idea of a historic site. Historic site. They're talking about your pulling yourself together here, ultimately. To pull yourself together. So again, site. A plot of ground suitable or set apart for some specific use. A seat or ground plot. They're even separating it here. A site can be either a seat, where the government is, the state, or it can be a ground plot, which is what FDR created in 1933. That's the separation of church and state. You cannot survive such a separation. You have to pull yourself together, and that's what Minnesota Rule 220 does. When a man proves life, he's revested with his title. You got to claim the first moment. And that first moment gives you the rest of your life. It gives you the age of majority? Well, I'm kind of sad. I think I'm done. But you're not. You're just beginning. By the way, thanks everybody for letting me talk at you for 6 weeks. I know sometimes I sounded depressed. I sounded angry or frustrated, and I was. But I'm sad because I need people to get this stuff, because I struggle knowing that this is not that difficult. If the entire world woke up and got out of their berths and they were no longer sleeping passengers on a vessel, the world would change overnight. If we all woke up tomorrow and saw what has been done to us, it would end right now. But there's too many people chasing all kinds of rainbows and unicorns and flat earths and no offense, but you know what? All that shit is smoke and mirrors. We need to stop with all that stuff and get down to reality just for a moment and clear up reality. And then we can go back to bread and circuses. We can go back to bread and circuses, but we need to take care of business first. So on that note, remember, guys and gals, I am available. Don't think you can't call me. Tomorrow's going to be tough. I'll be on the road for about 3 hours. But you can try to call me. And again, if I can answer it, I will. So on that note, thank you very much, and stay in touch. I am out of here. Thanks, Brittany. Bye.